In this video, I will explain how Overpower works starting in Season 2, and how it interacts with critical strike damage and vulnerable, and also why Overpower may actually be overpowered in Season 2. With the changes to the damage buckets in Season 2, there's a real potential that Overpower will be the strongest in the game, especially now since it benefits from crit and vuln, unlike before where it was kind of by itself unsupported by other stats. On to the spreadsheet. This is my second video on damage buckets. If it's confusing, I recommend watching the first video where I explain the structure of the spreadsheet a little bit. The link is in the description. So the first big change that they made was that they actually made a new bucket with a 50% multiplier for Overpower that is multiplicative across the blue bar. It takes into account crit damage and vuln that calculates the final damage. And just like vulnerable damage and critical strike damage, Overpower has moved from its own bucket into the additive damage bucket with everything else. In addition to Overpower bonuses from items, there are two additional ways Overpower can add damage. The first one is Overpower Damage from Fortify. It's explained like this. Overpower attacks gain 2% damage per 1% of your base life you have in Fortify. Now let's translate this to be easier to read. Let's say we have a character with 5k base life. What we can do is we can take this part right here, put 50 life instead, because that's 1% of 5k. Now it's easier to read. You gain 2 damage for every 50 points you are fortified. And I set up the formula to calculate this, so I add 50 to Fortify, and then I get 2% additive damage. If I add another 50, I get another 2%. Very nice. The second way is Overpower Damage from bonus life. It's explained like this. Overpower attacks gain 2% damage per 1% of your base life that you have in bonus life above your base life. Let's do this one more time and translate this to be easier to read. Again, on a character with 5k life, we can take this part right here and put 50 life instead, because that's 1% of 5k. We can also replace the second part here with 5,000 because that's our base life. Now we read, you gain 2% damage for every 50 points you have in bonus life above 5k. And I set up the formula to calculate this. I have 50 bonus life, I get 2% additive damage. Another 50 and I get another 2%. And you can get this as high as you can get it. 20k life gives 600% additive damage, and you get more as you get more life. And combining this with Fortified, you can get an additional 800% for a total of 1400% damage. So is Overpower actually overpowered? I mean, it looks really good. With the changes to the buckets, the stats are now directly comparable. 125% critical strike damage is equivalent to 125% overpower damage in the calculation. You literally just take the higher percentage when comparing them. And that's how they relate now. Have an item with higher crit damage percentage than Overpower? Taking the crit will make you hit harder. Overpower have a higher percentage than crit damage? Taking the Overpower will make you hit harder. And with the Overpower stat being one of those stats with the highest percentages all around, it seems like it's the one to go for, especially when Blizzard is buffing the Overpower stat numbers by 50%. The only thing holding it back is this 3% Overpower chance and having to use alternative novel ways to guarantee the Overpower. The only question mark left is, do you want to crit or do you want to Overpower? Is having 50% crit chance more consistent than trying to generate guaranteed Overpowers? And this may not even be a choice that you have to make, because you can stack a crit chance on an Overpower build and combine them together. We just have to look forward to seeing what will rise to the top when the season starts. Thanks for watching, I hope this was helpful.